Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.
Hello, I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. We have a special guest today, one of my favorite senators of all time, former Senator Tim Jennings. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Lorraine. Glad to be here.
Well, you have an extraordinary record in that you came to the Senate in 1979. You served for 34 years, and during that time, you held every post in the Senate. Minority Whip, Majority Whip, Minority Leader. Wait, is there something else I'm missing?
No, I never was minority leader. I was minority whip, but I never made minority leader.
Oh, well, I'm crushed.
It's the only one I missed.
Then you went on to the majority leader, the president pro tem, and you were really a voice of honesty and reason through some very turbulent times in New Mexico. So I really wanted your perspective on what's happening now. So I'm glad to see you back in the halls. I know you're part of the SIC, the Securities...
Yeah, the State Investment Council.
State Investment Council. I know you're doing some lobbying. What's it like for you to be back here walking the halls, the marble halls?
You know, it's after losing an election, it's always hard to come back because this is a place that I was taught the process. When I came, Aubrey Dunn was kind of a mentor to me.
Senior Aubrey Dunn.
Senior Aubrey Dunn. And Clay Buchanan ran the council. When I came, I was a county commissioner for 4 years from 74 to 78. And when I was running, I came up here and I went to an LFC meeting. And I said, I want to learn. I want to know what you do. And I'm running for this office and I want to know what we do. And Senator Dunn picked me up out of the audience and says, well, here, young man, come up here and sit. And he put me up at the chair at the table with all the other senators and ask questions if you want, anything that comes up. And it was an amazing experience to me. And after that, I went in and I met this man, Clay Buchanan, who was the head of the council. And I says, I want to know how this place works. I want to know the grassroots. I want to know, how to make this place work. And he gave me some guidance about go to your committees the first couple years, and then when you get out of your committees, go sit in Senate Finance and listen. Mm-hmm. And I did that, and it was one of the best lessons I ever learned up here.
You really stood on the shoulders of giants because those were really some of the most important figures in New Mexico political history, and that you had the passion and the thirst to learn about this.
You just have to remember, at that time we had we had Aubrey Dunn was the chairman of the Senate Finance, and you had John Mershon, the chairman of House Appropriations Committee, both from the same district, basically, in Otero County. Yet they both, bumped heads a little bit every now and then, too. So it was an incredible time. Both were very dedicated long-term legislators, and it was really something to watch.
Your main issues in your years, I know you fought very hard for education and special ed and the developmentally disabled communities, but you and your wonderful wife, Patty, created the high-risk pool. So you ended up being a major formative figure in healthcare in New Mexico, you and Patty. So tell me a little about how that came out from your work here.
I'd have to go back when I look at all this. I mean, this was probably one of the luckiest things in the world. My second or third year here, I got to be chairman of the Education Committee and no one else wanted it. They'd had a little scandal there, and no one wanted it, and they said, well, why don't you take it? And I said, I don't want to be on the Education Committee. I was glad to get out of school. And they said, you have to learn it. You have to learn the funding formula and how that works. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And that was interesting. Lo and behold, we were coming along, and one of the reports when I was chairman of the Legislative Education Study Committee was there was a report that came up on lowering. First, it was to get 94-142 money, which were federal funds for children who have disabilities, and to accept that money into New Mexico. We were the last state to accept it. And we had a lot of money then, and we just thought it was better not having federal strings to it. So we did that, and right after that, I ran into, I met some ladies that were around that wanted to lower the school age and for kids with developmental disabilities. And one of them happened to be Patty. And Patty had a daughter that had Down syndrome, and Courtney was old enough then, but Patty had done everything she could to make sure Courtney could do all she could do. And so they had a study from the Coors Group, in Colorado, that showed that if you lowered the school age for kids with Down syndrome and with developmental disabilities, if you lower that age group and brought the 3 and 4 year olds in instead of serving them from 5 and 6 on, you increased their ability to learn and how much they learned, and you lowered the actual cost of educating those children to the best of their ability. And it just made good economic sense. And so we set out, and we had a coalition in the House and at that time, and we passed that bill on lowering the school age for kids with disabilities for 3 and 4 year old children. We passed that in a year of declining money, and it was $13 million in new appropriations. And we passed that bill, it's the only bill that broke the coalition in the House that they had. And in the Senate, we were in good shape, and was an amazing thing. And it taught me a lot. As chairman of the committee, they asked me about doing this, and they weren't sure they wanted me. But I said, well, if you want to pass this bill, I believed it. It made sense to me about early education. And I said, if you want to pass it, this is what we need to do. And we set out on a path, and with 6 or 7 moms throughout the state, we put together a group of people that passed that bill in a year of declining money. Unheard of, to add $13 million when the monies were declining.
And then how did you evolve from that to the high-risk pool?
Well,
and tell what it is.
The high-risk pool. The high-risk pool it's for people who have had health issues and became uninsurable. At that time, you just couldn't get insurance. An insurance company would insure, in your workplace, we'll do 3 out of 4 of you, but we won't do the one that costs so much money. And so then it became very difficult for people who had health issues to be hired because they couldn't be covered by insurance like all the other employees, or else they were singled out. And what happened also was our daughter Courtney couldn't get health insurance because she had Downs. Well, Courtney was healthier than our other 2 children at that time. Courtney was healthy as an ox. I mean, she was strong, everything, and she was perfect health. She just happened to have Downs. And so we set out to create a high-risk pool. There were 7, I think, in the country at that time. And Patty and I set out to get the high-risk pool. She did all the research herself, and we went to the council surface to have them draft the legislation on the high-risk pool, and they said, they said, well, you know more about this than anybody else. And they said, here's a drafting manual. And in 1986 or 7, they gave her a drafting manual and said, go draft the bill. The bill was 39 pages long, and we changed 1 sentence in that bill. And it passed, and we set up the high-risk pool. She ran the high-risk pool as a volunteer for 5 or 8 years, and then they hired her to run it because the pool was getting too big, and so they hired her to run it as a full-time job. And then so we did that. It was crazy. Everything has happened, even when she was running the pool as a volunteer. One time they came in, and one of our largest hospital associations in the state, based out of Albuquerque, sued Patty individually because she denied a heart-lung transplant when they were experimental, and they sued. Well, it's a community property state. I don't know. They sued her and inadvertently got me too. So for a volunteer, I thought that was really sour grapes, and but that happened, and the pool grew and grew, and it was picked where we had over 10,000, or right at 10,000 people in the pool at one time. It was chosen as the national model of health insurance, health insurance pools in the country, and so it's a very effective pool. Governor Johnson came along, and when he privatized all the Medicaid and Medicare, all the government programs into the private market, that was a perfect opportunity for us to go in and put a plan in for an income-based assessment to get into the pool, so you could get people of wasn't just income-based, just the rich people could get it. It was income-based, so then all walks of life could get into the high-risk pool, and that became, was really something that was fantastic.
Well, I know how many lives you saved with that. It was an incredible creation, and I always give thanks to you and Patty for doing that. Nationally, and that was an element when in the Affordable Care Act you couldn't be refused for pre-existing conditions. That was based on what everyone had learned from these high-risk pools. You can't deny people insurance. They're the ones who need it the most. But let's quickly go nationally, where there's so much uncertainty about whether the Affordable Care Act will be repealed and what it'll be replaced with. How does New Mexico stand? What will happen to us?
Well, the governor has a plan to do away with the high-risk pool in New Mexico, but nationally, there are a number of Speaker Ryan for the U.S. House of Representatives, and they're all talking about creating more high-risk pools and putting individuals in high-risk pools that have high risk, so you can manage your health care and keep the rates lower in the rest of the marketplace. And that's kind of the goal where they're kind of looking at right now. It seems to be in Washington. They're looking at make sure every state has a high-risk pool as to where to put these individuals that are high cost. In New Mexico, we have gotten down. We had 10,000 in with the Affordable Care Act. When that came in, we've dropped down to about 2,700 people in our pool in New Mexico, and those are almost impossible to get off. They are just such high cost. Those 2,700 people probably cost around $80 million for their health care, and that's a lot. If you move those individuals into the private market, well, first, you have to understand New Mexico has about 45% of people covered by governmental programs. You've got about 5 to 8% getting up around, so it gets you about 50 that are just flat uninsured, period, and won't get insurance. You have about 25% that self-assess or in large groups, and then you have 25% that are in an individual market or small groups. And the way that it's all assessed, what happens when they close if they try to close New Mexico's healthcare pool, what happens is the $80 million cost for those 2,700 people will be pushed over into the small group and the individual market, which will probably cause the New Mexico Health Exchange and the small group markets to crater. And that exchange will close, and then we won't have anybody with insurance in the small group or individual plans. And that's one of the real tragedies that's going on right now.
Well, we're speaking today with former Senator Tim Jennings, Democrat from Roswell. 34 years you served in the Senate. Another national situation that we're in that concerns me, thank you so much for your health perspective, but the Oxford Dictionary named the word of the year for last year post-truth. And we're in the world of fake news and really bitter, toxic partisanship. What ways do you think, how can we get out of that, and how is it affecting our elections here? If you can, were targeted in your election, which is the reason you lost. I'd love it if you could talk about that and maybe extend it to some other candidates that were specifically targeted who ended up losing. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, you know, there's with the advent of some of the federal changes in election law, allowing super PACs, you can come in and there's no trails. You can't tell where the money comes from, who it comes from. They can say anything they want, and there's no real proof or any way to get even with someone saying the things that they say. And you know, it came out of my campaign, got to be real negative, and that's fine. You know, a lot of the things they got mad at about me for was the driver's licenses. And I'm just going to tell you that in an area that has a large amount of oil and gas, a large amount of agricultural workers and dairies, which dairies are another third of our economy in agriculture, a lot of those people might not have all their documentation in order. And that's just true, but they're the only ones that'll work. And you know, if we want to change things, well, we need to pass some drug laws that you can't get benefits if you can't pass a drug test, because those are the individuals that work. And so a lot of that was there. I was worried about our state's economy. We can see what happens if you can't get the oil out of the ground. Same thing as if it goes in the tank. You know, it's going to crater, and you've got to milk those cows. And so that got some people upset. It was a national cry kind of about illegal immigrants or undocumented immigrants. But when you turn back around and look, there are plenty of safeguards to know who they are. If you get a picture of them and get them in an ID, you can take care of it. The ID Act that passed was very similar to the ones that I wanted. Very similar, probably more similar than not. And you turn around and look at its implementation has been sorry at best. And
Well, I have a very deep-seated sense of justice, and to me, if someone tells a lie about you and you have no recourse, and it's broadcast all over the state, you know, we try to have ethics commissions. There's a lot of things we try to do. I would love to see the television stations vet the ads for truth before they just take the money and run them. But I'm very idealistic in that respect. Your former colleague, Michael Sanchez, was targeted with things that were so blatantly untrue, and they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to get him.
you know, and everybody knows the individual that said he went to Hawaii and went on his family on a public junket. Michael never cared that much about flying, and Michael's not a guy that went on a trip all the time. There's a lot more villains than that, and it certainly wasn't Michael Sanchez. And yet the same individual that did it, he's still around, saying all those mean, vicious things. The thing I think we really have to look, and I'm probably so proud of, I think, one of my legacies in the Senate. It's mine and Benny Altamirano's and some of us. But, we work together. Mm-hmm. We put aside hate. And when no democracy or anything else or anyone I know can sleep when they create that much hate or exist in that much hate. And we don't have that in the Senate. And, I was looking down there to this, a couple days ago and looked down there, and here's the minority floor leader, Stu Engel, standing at his desk, and Peter Worth over there walked all the way across there. And I watched them, and they sat there and talked in front of their desk about the things that were going on the floor, and they were laughing and happy. And, that's government. Pete Domenici and Sam Nunn used to come down here, and whenever Pete would have a meeting, it seemed like Sam Nunn came from, because Sam did defense and Pete did the budget, and the two of them would come down here. If I didn't know better, I'd swear they raised their families together, or reared their families together. I guess you raise cattle and you rear people, but but that's the way it should be. And now it's almost in our own house. It's a lot of times there's an awful lot of mean-spiritedness that doesn't need to be there. And in the Senate, they work that out. We work that out. We have staff and stuff that work together, and the people respect each other more in the Senate. And I'm proud to be a part of that.
Well, where do we stand now? I know that you've worked so much with healthcare, and you've mentioned the issue of tax reform and the issue of, I'm all for ethics reform, but where do we stand now in New Mexico, and what do you think our greatest challenges are, and do you have any solutions for those challenges in 4 or 5 minutes?
In 4 or 5 minutes. The greatest challenges, I think, is we have to get New Mexico moving in the same manner forward. And there was a report out yesterday from the Wall Street Journal that said we were 50th of 50. And we've always been 48th. We were always so glad to have Mississippi and things. And Mississippi's turned around a little bit, so we might be below them now. We have a lot of issues that we need to face. But the things that we need to face is coming up. We have a lot more problems in a lot of states because of all the federal and private land in this state. We don't have the same tax sources that they do between property tax and gross receipts tax. It creates a very difficult situation to fund all the different governmental entities in our counties. One county's 92% federal, the next one's all 100% deeded. And it creates a lot of inequities, and we have to figure that out. Harvey, oh gosh, this is not a Republican plug, but he's a former chairman. Harvey Yates is putting together a group, Adelante, about trying to move New Mexico forward. And he's reached out to people that it's a little more conservative tent. I'd agree with that, but he's reached out to people about moving New Mexico forward. Taking us. Everybody bury the hatchet, and let's sit down and figure out what we can do to get jobs in this state. If everybody has a good job, everybody's happy. Mm-hmm. We've got to have good jobs, and that means we're going to have to work on our workforce. We're going to have to work on drug testing. I mean, you get $100,000. In the oil boom, you get $100,000 a year job driving a truck if you could pass a drug test. And so many couldn't pass the drug test. These are all things we have to sit down and look at moving New Mexico forward. We can't tolerate the number of pickup trucks and trailers that are stolen in Albuquerque anymore. We can't, you look at our violent crimes. We have 600 violent crimes for every 100,000 people, one of the highest in the country. We can't tolerate that. We have to stop violence, and we have to sit down and look at it together, and that means not throwing stones at everybody and saying, oh, well, he's good and he's good. It means, we have to sit down and say, we're all going to get together and solve this.
It does require leadership.
Well, and we'll just have to work, and we're going to find it. And I think we can, but we have churches. We all had parents that had high values and stuff, or else you wouldn't be in the jobs we're in. I mean, I don't do nasty negative campaignings. My parents taught me better. Yeah. But we all have those parents, and we all know better. In your heart of hearts, it's wrong. And I think we just need to all sit back and look. And so, when we have kids out there, they're going to have to know there's responsibilities for their actions. And it goes all the way back to home. It's families, it's, family values, everything. If, we know teen births, we've actually been doing better in teen births. And so that's good, but there's a responsibility for that young man too, not just the young woman. And we need to know about that, and we need to figure out how to make sure that we can move our foot forward into Mexico and never take a step back. Maybe a small step each day, but we never take that step back. And that's what we have to do. But we can do that. We can do that because people want to. People want us to be forward. I don't like reading about the murders and the children that have been killed and for no reason. And some of the horrific crimes here, they're not right at all. And we just need to stop it, and we can do it. It means we all have to get involved, and we all have to do it. But we can do it together, and we don't have to throw stones about somebody has a different opinion. They're entitled to that opinion, just like you're entitled to yours.
Well, in the last couple of minutes, people always like a call to action. Well, I agree, but I don't know what to do. So do you have some ideas of people who feel this call and who were raised right and who know the right thing to know when it's the right thing to do, but they don't know what the right thing to do is. Maybe you could give our audience, some suggestions.
You know, I think it's the biggest thing I think you can do is be tolerant and learn the other issue. In the Senate, I always told the Democrats, I'd say, you go over and have lunch with a Republican and go learn his issues. And I'd tell the Republicans, you guys go over and you have lunch with a Democrat and learn their issues. Learn what makes their community tick. The differences between Deming and Raton are huge, and the differences between San Juan and Hobbs are huge. And you look at all that, then we have all these places in the middle. Have Albuquerque with pretty robust economic growth, and you've got the Northeast that's hurting. The Southeast, the Southeast is hurting a little bit. They're bouncing back, and then you can go over to Luna, and they've got some agriculture and stuff going. And the Northwest has 25% unemployment. Mm. We have to listen to each other and make sure that, we understand about fixing the environment and things, but you can't turn off coal altogether and put all the Navajo people out of work that are working in those mines up in Navajo. Maybe we need to put some scrubbers on their coal, and maybe we all have to sit down and pay for it. But that's all right. Maybe there's something that they have to do to help us fill a pit or something in Hobbs or Carlsbad. And and then we need, what have we done in Raton and to make sure that the Northeast has done well. And they've had, ever since their mines kind of slowed down, they've had a real economic hard time.
Well, I will take a Republican and a Democrat to lunch. That's a good start. But that's what I love about the Senate. There was always this, they might fight on the floor, but afterward, they would be friends and watch each other's kids grow up and work together for the good of New Mexico. And you had a lot to do with that in your many years in the Senate. Our guest today, and thank you so much for joining us, former Senator Tim Jennings, Democrat from Roswell, back up walking the marble halls again. It's good to see you.
Nice to see you.
And I'm Lorene Mills. I'd like to thank you, our audience, for being with us today on Report from Santa Fe. We'll see you next week.
Past archival programs of Report from Santa Fe are available at the website reportfromsantafe.com. If you have questions or comments, please email info@reportfromsantafe.com. Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.